Hey, welcome to episode 244 of KT Confidential, the real estate podcast. Today we're talking about Canadians and their struggle with the current interest rates. Let's go.
All right, so we're recording this 2 days before the Bank of Canada rate announcement on July 12th. And this will be published, I don't know, 5 days later when you're listening to it now. So it'll be interesting to see what happened.
Now the public knows our secrets.
Well, how many people are recording live? Not many. I don't think most people are expecting that this is a live podcast.
We should do a live podcast. Like, not all the time. Let's not get exaggerated here. But yes, interest rates, you think they're, here's your crystal ball, your prognostication.
Everything says it's going up, likely 0.25%, 25 basis points.
Mm-hmm.
If it didn't, because I think there's so much anticipation that it's going to, if it didn't, it would spur, I think, a lot of activity in the real estate market, which would be nice at this point because the market's simmered down a fair bit, which is not uncommon for this time of year also. So you've kind of got all these different things coming together.
I can tell you, over the last week, I have had more questions about, quote unquote, and you hear me say this all the time, realtors always get asked, how's the market?
Yes.
I've had more of those questions in the last week than I have in months. And it is a good question. It's a valid question. It's one that a lot of people have on their minds. But to your point, end of June, school wraps up. What are people doing? They're going to Canada's
Vacations.
Wonderland. They're going to the cottage. They're going to...
And now that, is this our first year of being able to get out of the country, really? No, this is the first year for non-vaccinated people to leave.
Right.
Which, I mean, there's not a lot, 10% of the population or something like that. But still, that all these things compound and affect.
Well, it's also, whether or not you were allowed to leave last year, I think a lot of people this year, like now we're back to normal. Right? Like, let's face it, we're back to normal. Took 3 fucking years.
You know what's funny, though, is I booked a showing yesterday for today.
Yeah.
And they had the COVID warning. So I as I should, I messaged the agent and say, hey, I saw this warning says I have to wear a mask. Is this true? She's like, actually, yes, we do want people wearing masks. But tomorrow you're okay because they're out of town. They're more concerned when they're in town.
Right.
So there are still people concerned by it, but it's a minuscule number.
Sure. Yeah, people with health concerns. Yeah.
But for the most part, we're done with it.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
But
hey, I'd love to bring back the COVID-19 real estate market. That would be nice right about now.
It's going to happen. Like, think about, okay, so today we're focused on a topic that, again, sometimes we like to refer back to articles that are published, other media that is published. So there was an article on Tuesday, June the 27th by Claire Feinstein. And Toronto Star article titled, Lenders Now Seeing 60, 70, and even 90-year mortgages as Canadians struggle with rocketing interest rates. So we're going to talk about that today, but on the topic of how's the market, end of June, right into...
May was busy.
Mid-September, like once the kids get back to school, back to normal life routines, there are less showings, there is less activity. Doesn't mean the market's bad, just means there's less activity. So it could mean your home is on the market longer. It could mean that buyers have an opportunity to maybe beat you up on price because they might be the only offer versus, having said that, the stat year over year now, comparing June of last year to June of this year, if you follow us on Instagram, you'll see our market stats post from last week. Ian. Yes, Ian does a very good job of putting it out in a timely fashion, so it's all relevant information.
Yeah, year over year, we were up by
over 3%.
something. I can't remember the exact figure. But,
Right. First time that we've seen an increase year over year.
And that's a very sustainable number.
Sure. It's a very realistic. That's a good hike in this type of market. So
I would say, so you're saying it's not a bad market. I would argue that it depends on the perspective, I suppose. There's so many different angles you could look at the market. But I would say the market is down. So if that's what you would call bad, I would say...
Down based on what?
Well, activity, prices. I think everything is being pulled back a little bit.
In the last few weeks only.
Yeah. But I think it's still relative. Like if you are buying and selling in the same market, it's no different. You're still net the same amount at the end of the day.
Yep.
And I've seen this video a number of times, but a client...
I'm trying to see what it is because it's playing there and
it's Barbara Corcoran. I've seen this video and there's many people who say the same thing. So Barbara Corcoran's talking about, while she tends to her plants, talks about how there are a lot of people that are afraid to buy right now, right? Or, affordability and interest rates are scaring them. But it's all, you either pay more money for the house and get a low interest rate, or you get a high interest rate and pay less money for the house. The high interest rate and less money for the house is a better scenario, because if rates come down, which some are predicting in the range of 3% next year, end of 24, you've bought low. Now you can refinance, refinance and benefit from the low price as well.
And a lot of people don't take that plunge because it's all predictions, right? Like nothing is concrete, nothing is guaranteed. So even though you think the interest rates in 18 to 24 months might be 2 or 3% less, we don't know that.
Right. No, you don't, of course.
You don't know what's going to happen. It's just like, I'll give you, because, I'm a big Toronto Maple Leaf fan. I don't often talk about that because I like to stay sports neutral. Well,
you should. People want to know what you enjoy and what sport teams you are a fan of. And
sure. I was taught in sales not to talk about sports or religion and politics because you could offend people that don't have the same views, right?
But you know what? I think that's changing nowadays.
It is. You're right. Toronto Maple Leaf fans,
yes,
and Montreal Canadiens fans, i.e. Steve Bruman on the team, when it comes to talking about sports, they don't see eye to eye. We'll stay politically correct with that statement. Anyways, I'm a big Toronto Maple Leaf fan. And pre-COVID, the Toronto Maple Leafs signed their two biggest, potentially 3 or maybe even 4, their core 4, their top 2 players for big contracts, $11.64 million and $10.93 million, something like that. Mm-hmm. Pre-COVID. And they did that with the anticipation that the salary cap was going to go up considerably over the course of their contract. COVID hit, there was no revenue, and the salary cap remained the same.
Right.
Now the salary cap next year is just slowly going to start climbing. But nobody, and it screwed the Maple Leafs. It handcuffed them for years because they're paying these guys $11 million a year. Salary cap didn't increase, so it didn't give them the flexibility to go and get other good players because they didn't have the money to do that. So in this case, relating that to real estate, you cannot forecast you can guess, but nothing is concrete. And that's where people have, in my belief, that's where they have a little bit of fear. Because now you're going to buy, I don't know, an average, let's say in Halton region, where we do 70% of our business.
Yeah.
Let's focus on Milton, where we live. A 30-something young family with 1 child and 1 child on the way. They have their first home already. It's a smaller townhome. Like, this is what Milton is. And now they want to upgrade. They want to upgrade to a detached home. They want to upgrade to a bigger home. They want to upgrade to a double car garage home, whatever. So you're selling for, call it $1 million, and you now got to spend 1.4. You need a $300,000 to $500,000 increase in price.
Yeah.
So you're now going to take, well, we had this discussion the other night. You want to upgrade to anything, that's another $500,000 mortgage.
Right.
Right?
Well, for most, it's not feasible.
Right. So not feasible at the current interest rates.
Right.
Because now you're talking, what's that? An extra $3,000 a month at the current interest rates?
Well, the other thing too is like I was saying like it's a bad market for certain people, but it's a good market depending on what you're doing. And it's
so here's my suggestion, my recommendation to people that I'm talking to that have that fear. Your RSPs, like, look at other areas that you have money. If you're broke as shit, then let's not even have a conversation. But if you have RSPs, GICs, you have a sports card collection, you have a comic book collection, you have a car that's worth $70,000, whatever, can you, take a little bit of a hit for a year or two, spend that extra, whatever, $60,000, $70,000 that it's going to cost you over the next couple of years in order to make that move.
Right.
And then refinance at that time when...
Well, anticipating that this is now a better investment than those things.
What is going to happen, mark my words, what is going to happen when that time comes that interest rates go down significantly, it's going to have to at some point. When that happens, everybody and their mother is going to be lined up to buy real estate, and shit's going to go crazy. There are going to be multiple offers. People will have the fear of missing out and trying to catch up, and it's going to be a complete free-for-all. And if you look at the statistics of immigrants coming into the country, coming into the GTA specifically, you look at all that, it's only a matter of time. It's not if, but when.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people said, oh, it's so many immigration. There's so many people coming, not enough houses. The market's never going to crash. Then the rates went up and they're like, oh, interest rates play a factor. So there is more to the equation than just people, because if it's
plays a factor, but it didn't crash. This is not a crash. This is adjustments.
No, it's a crash. A crash is
my
determined.
ass.
It went down like 30% from its peak. That's a crash.
It went up like 4,000% from when you bought it.
Doesn't matter. It's still
sure
a crash.
It does.
Well, tell the person that bought it 30% higher. That's not a crash.
Yeah, but
they're at home crying right now because they can't afford their house. And those are the people that are in a bad position. So it is a bad market for people that are forced to sell.
Forced to sell is a different story than living in a home that you overpaid for, but you can still afford until the market corrects itself to be worth more than you paid for it.
Right. But
if you're going to be in the home for 10 years, chances are you made a good investment regardless of what you paid for it.
As long as they can afford it.
Right.
But there's a lot of people that can't. So those are the people where it's unfortunate. And that in those scenarios, I would, call it a bad market in that specific scenario.
Well, and this is why we talk about when you do buy a home is understand your budget. Understand that you have utilities to pay. You have property taxes. You have food. You have clothes. You have all of these things. So do you really need a 3,000 square foot, 4-bedroom home backing onto green space with a finished basement?
Right.
Or could you be okay with a 2,500 square foot home in a nice neighborhood for a few $100,000 less?
Well, one, to be fair to some of those people is that they bought, there's a lot of people that bought when interest rates were low rather. And the Bank of Canada for a long time was saying, we're not raising interest rates. And then all of a sudden they raised interest rates, and to put it lightly, they went high and fast. So for the people, and this ties back into the topic, which we've kind of gotten away from, but for the people on variable rates, depending on the type of variable rate, so you can have a variable rate with a fixed payment, or you can have a variable rate with a floating payment that adjusts with interest rates as they fluctuate. For people that have a fixed payment,
go ahead.
Every time interest rate goes up, if they don't adjust their payment, their amortization is extending. And that's how we get to the 60, 70, 90-year mortgages, because they're paying off less and less principal every month, which extends their amortization.
So I refinanced a portion of, I have some segments of mortgages, and one segment on one of the properties came up for renewal 8 months ago now.
I think it was 8%.
9 months ago.
Yeah.
Might as well be.
Yeah.
9 months ago. And my payment on that segment is $1,917.62 a month.
You just pulled that out of your head?
I know my budgets very well. And so let's call it $2,000 a month. Over 9 months, it's $18,000 that I've paid in mortgage payments during that time.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at the balance compared to the original balance.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you think it paid down in 9 months?
In 9 months.
So
$18,000.
I paid $18,000 into it.
This is the new mortgage at the new rates.
Correct. Which is a variable rate.
$3,000 of principal.
Just above $2,000.
Yeah, it's crazy.
$16,000 in interest on $18,000 of payments.
It's hard to swallow that. And even worse, and this goes back to the fact that a primary residence is not an asset. Although there's arguments that it is, which we believe obviously and have seen it in many cases. But that's not, you can't write it off.
It's a non-liquid asset.
Right. So
unless you're refinancing and using the equity you have to reinvest in other avenues, but who the hell right now is refinancing and taking money out to reinvest that money?
Now, if that were a rental property, it wouldn't be as big of a deal because it's okay. Well, I've got, $15,000 and change of interest. I can just write that off against all the income. But on your primary residence, it's just out the window.
Well, we have seen a significant amount of investors that are cashing out because when they purchased, they were already negative every month.
Yes.
We're seeing this on condos right now.
Tons of assignment sales too.
Good time to be buying a condo or an assignment because there are desperate people out there. You got to be looking for the right deal and have the right negotiator on your team if you're buying it. They went in with a minimal down payment. So you buy a $500,000 condo, you put 20% down, $100,000 down, mortgaging $400,000. Now all of a sudden the payment is $2,500 a month on the mortgage, plus you have property taxes and maintenance. Now you're $3,000 a month to carry it, but you're only bringing $2,300 a month in rent. So now you're negative $700 a month, whereas before you were probably negative $100 or maybe $200.
Yeah.
So now you got to pull $500-$600 out of your budget from your primary residence, essentially. So where are you cutting back?
Right. Well, and this has also trickled into the residential rental market, where people who are getting new tenants now need to charge more in order to afford to keep the property. Yes. And
you're going into my whole other podcast topic. We're going to talk about that
we
next week.
We won't elaborate on it. But yeah, so that's impacting rental rates. And because everybody's charging more now because they have to.
Stay tuned for next week's episode 245, where we talk about landlords being picky and charging a lot more too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An important topic. So yeah, it's unfortunate for some people, but that also presents an opportunity for others. So it is a good time to buy. It's a good time to move. It's a good time to invest. It's just is what it is.
If you're selling now and not buying any other real estate, I would say try and hold off until the fall or spring market. Depending on what your time frame is, obviously, of needing or wanting to sell, but hold off. This summer is not the summer to be just selling. You need to sell and buy something. Right. If you're upgrading, amazing time to upgrade your home. Your payments, yes, are going to be higher, but when you are able to refinance that property, you will have quite a deal on your hands, and you will look back 5 to 10 years from now, look back at it and say, wow, glad we did it at that time.
Yes.
Especially if you're looking in the GTA, especially the outskirts of the GTA, like Oakville, Milton, Burlington, great examples.
It's probably never been more important, though, to be very strategic with choosing your mortgage. Don't get so fixated on the interest rate.
Yes.
Focus on how long is the term for? What are the penalties to break it? Can you break it? Can you port it? These things are important. Because
very important.
As the Bank of Canada makes adjustments over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, which we will see, you'll want to be able to have the opportunity to make changes with it.
You will also want the opportunity to make additional payments, potentially, to increase your payment, or in a worst case scenario, skip a payment.
Yes. Well, I'm a good, I've taken advantage of that. I've always topped up my payment by a couple $100 every payment biweekly. And because of that, my trigger rate, which you can maybe explain, is 8.4% or something.
Yeah. Well, talking about trigger rates, just the other week, I got on one of my mortgage segments, I got a letter from Royal Bank that said, we have increased this one is an accelerated biweekly payment of $477 roughly, $471, and they increased it to $486. I want to say like $15 biweekly, because my payment of $470 wasn't even covering the interest.
Right.
So I'm paying down zero principal at the moment on that segment. So they had to increase the biweekly payment just to cover the interest. And that's the trigger rate, basically, is at what point does your payment have extra money there to pay down the principal? So now, if you have the right mortgage product, you could look at it and say, okay, well, to pay the interest only is $486. I can bump it up to $550 because I can afford that extra $70 every 2 weeks, in order to be paying down some of the principal, so my total principal balance at least gets reduced every month. Now, if it's an investment property, you may not want to do that because your interest is tax
interest
deductible.
Only is fine. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't care. Ride it out.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of things, this is more than ever the time that you need great allies in investing, in purchasing, and in selling any type of real estate. You need a realtor that is educated not only on all facets of how this all comes together, from a budget standpoint, from a mortgage standpoint, from seeing a good deal when you know one. But it's also important to...
And also the exact opposite. Because I know people, who have purchased homes without assistance and way overpaid. There's homes on the market right now that I had one client, we put an offer on a property and I told them it's worth about $800. They really wanted it. So they said they would pay the asking price, which was over $1 million. But I said, you're crazy. Do not do it. And they ended up going up to $900, still didn't put a deal together. The seller was stubborn. And I insisted, don't put, just wait, ride it out a little bit. We ended up buying something else they're very happy with. And that property still sits on the market. They've done a price reduction.
Yep.
And they will continue to sit on the market. So it's important to have people to help you find good deals and also avoid mistakes.
Yeah. That kind of goes hand in hand with a good deal, though.
It's the opposite.
Is it?
Sort of.
No, the opposite would be you overpaid. You bought and overpaid.
No, that's what I mean. Making mistakes.
Right. That's it, I guess, for today's podcast. Here's one thing that I learned about this podcast.
Today?
No, in general.
Oh.
Because I talk to a lot of people that say, oh, yeah, I watch your podcast or I listened to your podcast. Great podcast last week, whatever.
I think a lot of them are also just referring to the clips, the micro content.
Maybe, but I do have a lot of people that I know that listen to it in their car, as an example.
Yes.
And when we say, hey, drop us a like, hit the subscribe button, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. Where the fuck are they going to do that? They're driving.
Right.
Right? You think they're going to come back?
Can you say, hey, Siri?
Yes.
Hey, Siri.
Send KT Confidential.
Follow this podcast or like this podcast. Oh, my phone's listening to me now. We don't usually ask people for things. So today,
even so, like I watch our podcast on YouTube. By the way, if you go to ktconfidential.ca, it'll take you right to that playlist. So I watch it at home in our little theater room on the YouTube app.
Okay.
Well, I'm not leaving a comment from there, right? Like,
yeah.
The most you can do is leave a thumbs up, and that's if you're
on your TV.
On your TV.
Yeah, so it's not as intuitive or it's not as convenient.
It's not, and that's only if you're signed into YouTube. If you're using it signed out, then you can't even do that.
Right.
So, anyways, my point is just keep listening, and if you get a chance, go on.
Show some support.
Yeah, show some support in some way. Somehow.
Ariel wants to get to 1,000 followers on YouTube.
1,000 subs.
So if you are subscribers, sorry. So if you are watching this,
and we're at like 550 now, something like that.
All right, let's see how quick we can get to 1,000.
Yeah.
Go hit us up on YouTube, subscribe.
Because we know we got more people watching and engaging. They're just not subscribing. So
I think they get the point.
I don't know. Go and visit us on Instagram where you can see some of these highlights.
Yes.
Bye. Thank you for watching episode 244. Keep watching, keep listening. We appreciate the love. And if you get a chance, leave us a comment.